Hello, everyone. My name is Tresha Haefner, and I'm a creativity coach and the founder of the Poetry Salon. I'm going to make this video today because I've seen a lot of people asking this on social media. Given the very difficult times that we live in, what is the place of the writer? What is the place of the writing teacher? I know there are a lot of folks out there who are writing in community or they facilitate creative writing programs in schools or sometimes just among their friends. And they've been asking, how do we deal with some of the difficult things we're seeing on the news or experiencing in our personal lives or in our public lives right now, in a way that is helpful? And first of all, I just want to say I love that I'm part of this community where people are asking, how can I help? I think that's really important now, but always, that we are thinking about ways to help other people. And I have a master's degree in the psychology of creativity, or more specifically, I think you would say I have a master's degree in humanistic psychology with a specialization in creativity studies. And over the last 10, 15 years, I've been using that degree and what I learned in that program to teach creative writing classes at the Poetry Salon, but also with schools and with nonprofits. And you know, I've worked with people of all different ages and in different life circumstances. So I've worked with kids who are currently incarcerated, with people who are experiencing homelessness, and then also working with people in a purely academic setting, um, schools and colleges and so forth like that. And what I want to bring today are a few things that I know from my experiences and my education that I think can be very helpful in facilitating a creative writing class. And the first thing I want to say is a little caveat. My master's is in the psychology of creativity or humanistic psychology with a specialization in creativity studies. I am not a therapist. And I always try to make it really clear that I teach creative writing as an academic pursuit, as an artistic pursuit, but it's not the same as therapy. And anyone who wants to have more specific help with mental health needs to go to a professional for that. And I highly encourage everyone to find a good therapist because I think everybody needs someone to talk to. I'm in therapy. Everyone I know is in therapy. Everyone I meet, I tell them, if you're not in therapy, you should be, right? So I think that we're entering an age where it's really much more normalized that everyone is seeing somebody for mental health purposes, and if not for dealing with real significant problems, sometimes just for personal growth. So I really encourage people to get in touch with mental health care professionals, and if you are in a position where you're teaching other people, you want to make sure that you can offer them the proper resources so that they don't come to you as a therapist. That being said, often people come to their teachers for advice, right? So sometimes we are here to offer each other a listening ear one way or the other. Okay. But that being said, uh, I have learned that there are a number of tools that I have found from the psychology aspect of my work that also correlate with the artistic aspect of the work that I do. And I think there's sort of this debate. I've seen people talking about how they'll teach a creative writing workshop that is for therapeutic purposes, meaning that they're putting the emphasis on helping people to process some feelings, write about their feelings, but they're not really trying to grade them. They're not trying to help them necessarily become published authors or get their work published. And then there's other groups where they say, we are here to help you learn how to be a better artist, a stronger writer. And we're going to teach you some elements of writing craft, but we're not here for therapy. And we're not here just to help you process your feelings. And for me, I actually don't see that divide. I think that if you are learning about art as an art, it can help you have a better therapeutic experience. And I think that if you were having a better therapeutic experience and you're recording it artistically, then you are probably going to be creating maybe stronger, deeper art. So I don't really make that divide. I'm here in my workshops and in all the work that I do, trying to help people to write better poems. And of course, that's subjective. So I'll just say to help them write poems that are more interesting, more engaging, more artistically sound. And I also want people to have an experience of transformation. Art and therapy have that in common. We're really working to help create a sense of transformation. When we say a piece of writing or a piece of art moves you, what we're saying is it transformed us, our experience. We're moving from one feeling to another feeling. And the same goes with mental health work. We're hopefully moving from one mental state, emotional state, physical state sometimes to a different state, hopefully a better state, right? Hopefully we are transforming in a way that is positive and that is growth oriented, to use some of those terms that I use in psychology and in education: growth focus, growth mindset, right? I'm going to draw from one of my favorite books, Writing as a Way of Healing by Luis DeSalvo, How Telling Our Stories Transforms Our Lives. And Luis DeSalvo in this book is really drawing from a lot of work from a guy named James Pennebaker, who, as far as I know, is one of the leading voices, if not the leading voice, in the research around writing and mental health. And I'd highly recommend getting this book, but also getting some more of the information from James Pennebaker directly. However, if you don't have time to read, I think this is, say, 220-ish pages of writing. I am going to synthesize the best, most important, most useful tools that I have into basically two little snippets. I'm trying not to use the word bullet point anymore. So I'm just going to say two little snippets, two little pieces of useful, actionable advice that you can put into practice if you are teaching creative writing or even just doing creative writing for yourself every day. Okay. So with that said, what I'm going to invite everyone to do is we're going to do sort of a little bit of a class experience ourselves, and then I'm going to tell you why I'm doing this, why I'm outlining the class this way, and some of the, kind of reasoning behind it and how it's supposed to help. Okay. So the first thing that I'm going to say, if this were a workshop and you were coming into my classroom or my Zoom room, I would introduce myself, obviously. I would give the caveat that this is going to be writing for writing and it's not therapy. However, when you do some kind of creative writing, it is possible that you're going to stir some strong emotions, and that is okay. And if we're meeting in person, I would have tissue boxes because it's totally okay to cry and express your feelings here. And it's also okay to not express your feelings. And we are going to do some writing, and I will invite people to share if they want to. I absolutely will not pressure anyone to share if they don't want to share. So I want to set that safe space, that safe expectation. Everyone can write in the privacy of their own paper and pen or laptop or notebook or whatever you have, and I'm not going to invade that space unless invited. So that's the first thing I want to say. And the second thing I will say is that we're going to set a timer, and I'm going to invite everyone to do what I call a brain dump. Some people call this automatic writing, but you get to write for 15 minutes, whatever you want. You can write without stopping. If your wrist gets sore, you can definitely pause and stretch. Nothing is graded. I'm not going to read anything. I'm not even going to ask anyone to share what they write. This 15 minutes of writing is purely for you, just to get any thoughts that are in your head out of your head and onto some paper. Okay, so I will set a timer and we're going to write for 15 minutes. Only in this case, what I'm really going to do is just say, pause this video and take 15 minutes to do a little brain dump. And whatever is on your mind, just let it come out. Don't judge it. You don't have to stop writing. You can write without stopping for 15 minutes. And once you hit the 15-minute mark, you can resume this video. Okay, so pause, and we're back. I hope that was helpful for everyone. So one thing I want to say is, based on the work by James Pennebaker, he suggests that writing as little as 15 minutes a day can be therapeutic. And he's done all kinds of research that show it can lower blood pressure and increase feelings of well-being. Even if you are writing for yourself and you don't even share your writing with anybody else. And the reason that I like to start with 15 minutes of write whatever you want, I didn't used to do this, but I have had experiences where I worked with people, in kids and even adults who have been incarcerated. And one thing I found that really surprised me is I would sometimes go in thinking no one wants to write. I have to encourage everyone to write. And I'd sometimes find kids who are like, no, I've been waiting all week for a writing session and I know what I want to say. And if I came in and gave them an assignment and said, you need to write about this, sometimes I would get a lot of pushback because they were like, no, I know what I want to say. And of course, in writing and in art, I really want to encourage people to, to have that kind of sense of self-possession and honoring their own goals. And so I didn't want to shut anyone down and say, you have to listen to me and write the way I want you to write. If they knew what they wanted to write, I wanted them to have that experience. And often, with some of these people who are experiencing incarceration, they don't have pen and paper throughout the week. So it's not like I could say, go write about this on your own time. It really was right in this session, or you miss your opportunity. So it was really important for them to write what they wanted to write. So I started incorporating this experience of doing 15 minutes of free writing at the beginning of any session. But I also find it's just useful for me to get some of the clutter out of my mind. Sometimes when I write for 15 minutes, it's just a list of things I need to do. And then once I know it's written down, I sometimes can take a little sigh of relief and say, all right, I don't have to work so hard to remember all the things I need to do today. It's written down, right? So it can be very useful on multiple levels. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want to say, I realize it's just my face here. So I'm going to share my screen and share some of what I put in my Substack for everyone. And you can read along here, or you can just keep watching my face. But now I have to find what I was saying. Yeah, so I'm drawing on the book Writing as a Way of Healing. And that, of course, is a book that talks about writing as therapy. I also want to say another book that I turn to all the time is Structure and Surprise, edited by Michael Tunay. I think I'm spelling that correctly. And this is definitely a more advanced book that's for writers who are writing as an art form. And I don't think he uses the word therapy in there once. However, what that book will teach you how to do is kind of understand how the mind works and kind of understand how a poem works so that it engages what we like to call the epiphany, the aha moment, what sometimes we would call the message of the poem, right? I don't like the word message because it makes it sound like there's one message we're coming away with. And a poem really should be more about an experience, or any piece of writing or art is about an experience. If we wanted to write a message, we would write an essay, or we would, just put a message on a bumper sticker or something like that. However, sometimes that's the terminology people are comfortable with. So you can say this is the message of the poem, or, this is the wisdom of the poem. This is the thing that I've learned, or the thing I want to reveal, or the thing I discovered. In the book Structure and Surprise, they call it the volta, which I think is the Latin word that means a change, a turn. Yeah. So this is how we engage poetic turns. And if you want to put that more in a therapeutic terminology, you would say this is how we come to epiphanies. This is how we learn and gain wisdom from our lives. And of course, gaining wisdom, you know, it's an ongoing process. You can gain a little bit of it every day, and hopefully you do. And that, of course, is a sign of growing in a more conscious way. So that's actually how I use that book, which is a book about writing as an art. But I also find it super useful for kind of tricking my mind into giving over its epiphanies as well. Okay. Now I want to make this shorter. There's a whole bunch of different things I can say about the, theories behind why writing is helpful, and so forth. Um, but I think what I want to start out doing first is giving a little writing prompt, and then after we've done that writing prompt together, then I'll talk a little bit about how and why it works. So the first thing I'm going to invite everyone to do is I'm going to stop the sharing on that. The first thing I'm going to invite everyone to do is to write down some sensory perceptions. And another way we talk about this is the word imagery. Imagery is not just an image. Imagery is anything you see, hear, taste, touch, and smell. It's all of our sensory perceptions and how we talk about the things we perceive with our five senses. Okay. So anything you see, hear, taste, touch, or smell. And if that's really vague, and I think sometimes that can be really vague, well, so much I see, hear, taste, touch, and smell. You might ask something like, where is a place you would like to go to, or a place you want to be? Okay. Where is a place that you want to be? That could be a place you've never been before. It could be a place in your past. It could be a fantasy realm if you're making things up. If you had a weird dream and you just want to go back to that thing you were dreaming about, what are the sensory perceptions in that place? Can take a minute. You can pause as long as you need to write down some things you would see, hear, taste, touch, and smell in that place. Okay. And the other thing, so the second thing I want to invite everyone to do right now is we can talk about some reality now. What are the things that you need to do? The things that you need to do, maybe things that you don't even want to do, but you know you have to do. And what are the sensory perceptions that you associate with this? If I have to go wash the dishes, what am I going to see, hear, taste, touch, and smell washing the dishes? So you can pause and make your secondary list there. And presumably you've come back now, right? So I want to share some poems here. There are some really, really good poems on this topic. Where's my share button? There's my share button. Share. There's some really great poems, I think, on this topic, and I've got a number of them. And I don't usually like to use my own writing as an example, but I am going to because I know how this poem was generated and what motivated it, and so I can speak to this one in a way I can't speak to some other poems that I might use, right? Uh, this poem is called New Year's Resolutions 2025. And you'll see it's kind of going back and forth between some things that I wanted to do and some things I didn't want more of for 2025. And some of them are fun and funny and silly, and some of them I think are a little bit more serious, and some are a little more practical. So this is called New Year's Resolutions 2025. This will be the year I show up on time. Stop rehearsing lies in the front seat of my car, saying, I slept through my alarm when I know I never set one. I will get it together. Simplify. Stop sweating small and pissing in my own pond water. It will be the year I start saying no to low paying jobs, demand a higher hourly rate, and an escape car to Acapulco while we're at it. The year I finally go back to Asheville, try the vegan biscuits and coconut kale this time, stop scratching at California like an old rash, and be content, whatever is, wherever it is. Or maybe it's just the year I listen to that voice that says, close up your laptop and go for a walk. The year I get a photo of a yellowtail swallow in the butterfly bush outside our house. This will be the year I buy hoop earrings. I know, I'm too old. I'm not asking permission. This will be the year I shake my own head yes and no. Let those floozy little bitches shine. Obviously, if I were bringing this to a workshop with teenagers and people under the age of 18, I might have to black out some of the words that I use there. But still probably bring a variation on this poem. And you can tell that it's a poem that's going back and forth between the things that I want and ideally would be able to make happen, and some of the things that sometimes get in my way, or the things I don't want. And there's some imagery, some sensory perception in that poem. I'm going to go to Asheville and I'm going to eat the vegan biscuits and coconut kale. And I really want a pair of earrings. And then, some of the other stuff like, I know I'm too old for hoop earrings, although I've been told I'm actually not. I've been told by many people who are older than I am, you can wear them at any age. So that's really nice. So the prompt that I will give everyone is to write about what you want and what you don't want. And you can go back and forth. I wrote my poem as a list of New Year's resolutions for what I want to have happen, and some of the things that I'm trying not to do anymore, like trying not to show up late to things. But you can write this in another way, and I have some other really good prompts in there. I love this poem by Jimmy Santiago Baca called "I Am Offering This Poem," and he's talking about offering this poem as a gift. And there's certain things he can give and things he can't give. So that's another good example of a way of talking about what you want and what you have to do versus what you want and what you really can do. I also love Jenny Joseph's poem "A Warning," and there's a whole group associated with that. I think it's called like the Red Hat Society, or the Purple Hat Society, because she says, like, when I'm an old woman, I'm going to wear purple, even though I know it doesn't go with everything. And she talks about all the things she wants to do when she's older, but then she's like, oh, but now we have to have jobs and take care of the children and read the paper. So that's another poem that's going back and forth between what you want and what you have to do, or maybe what you want to do and what you don't want to do. Okay. So there's different ways you can talk about this, but I'm going to set a timer, or actually rather, I'm going to pause. I'm going to ask you to pause this video and ask you to set a timer for about 20 minutes and write on that subject. What are the things you want? What are the things that you have to do that maybe you don't want to do? And the only really strong pieces of guidance I want to offer is wherever your writing takes you, make sure you include sensory details. Make sure you are talking about things that you can see, hear, taste, touch, and smell. Don't just talk about feelings in an abstract way, but make sure you have that concrete imagery, and make sure you're talking about both the things you like and the things you don't like. Even if you talk about the things you like for 19 minutes and talk about something you don't like for 1 minute, or talk about things you don't like, maybe the list of things you have to do later today that maybe that's 19 minutes, and then one thing you talk about that you do like for 1 minute. That's fine. Just make sure you include a little bit of each. This is the point where I'm going to ask you to pause and resume. So if we were here in person, I would ask, how was that for everyone? But we're not here, so I will count on you to write. I also have heard that other poets do this, and I do this from time to time, something called a process journal, where you're doing your writing and then afterwards you write about the writing. So you might work on a poem and then have your process journal where you say, well, boy, my writing today was really difficult, or I got this prompt and it was challenging, or I did this writing today and I was surprised how easy it was. Usually it's hard, but today it was super easy. Whatever it is, you're just writing your feelings about the writing itself. And sometimes that can be really insightful. That can help you, me, anyone doing the process journal to gain some insights. All right, where did I put that document I was looking at? Up, 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 up. There we go. So here's some more sample poems here. I'm offering this poem by Jimmy Santiago Baca, Wife by Ada Limon. It's great. She kind of talks about the associations of being a wife, and like it's pretty clear she doesn't want to be associated with this, that, and the other thing. And then at the end, she talks about what she does want from being a wife. And it's a beautiful poem. I recommend that one. Okay. There are some other poetry prompts I'm sharing for those who are on my Substack, but we're going to go back up here to the work of Luis de Salvo from the book Writing as a Way of Healing. What I find so helpful, it's a great read and useful and engaging. And as I said, I think it's 220 pages of reading. But she's got a real quick couple of pages of just the do's and don'ts. So if there's nothing else you can do, you can take 10 minutes and go over the do's and don'ts. And I will admit, I came across this book maybe 8 years after I had been teaching, and I was kind of afraid. I was like, oh no, I I encourage people to write every day. And James Pennebaker said there are some ways that you can write that will actually make it worse. That there's some ways that you could be writing and engaged in a writing process that actually makes you less mentally healthy. And I was so worried when I read this list of do's and don'ts that I was going to find I had ruined some lives of my students by giving them bad advice. I was very pleased to find that the do's are mainly the things that you learn in your first year of creative writing. So that is encouraging. And I'm going to highlight the two things that I think are most useful of all the things. But let's go over the do's and don'ts according to Luis de Salvo. All right. Do's. Write regularly. Try short, consistent sessions, 20 minutes a day for 4 days to avoid overwhelm. That can be really important. Create a safe space, write in a private, comfortable, and secure environment. That's a big part of why I always begin classes by saying I won't force anyone to share if they don't want to, because some people really need to know that they have that privacy before they can write anything down. Be specific, use concrete, authentic details, linking feelings to events. So that's why we almost always start out by making a list of imagery and sensory perception. Also, we call these concrete details, right? Now, this is one area where I kind of disagree. I wouldn't even say I disagree with Luis de Salvo, but she does say explore trauma, write about unresolved traumas or persistent issues, focusing on past feelings and present feelings. Now, if you're in a workshop where the intention is to write about a specific subject, and I do know some people who teach grief workshops, or they might be offering a workshop on the political situation, and people are coming in wanting to write about a specific topic. When that happens, and people are kind of self-selecting that this is what they want to write about, great. When I'm in a general workshop and people are learning about writing itself, or maybe I'm meeting people for the first time and I don't know what their needs are or their boundaries are, I am really careful to create a writing prompt that is super open so that people can write about good events or events that are challenging for them. People can write about, the happiest day of their life or the worst day of their life. I try to offer options, and I try to focus on the writing craft and not at all on a specific topic. And part of that is for creative reasons. Like, I think people are going to be more creative when they're writing about something that they want to write about, and they have some juice behind it. But also for therapeutic reasons. I think a lot of us know that sometimes it takes a while to write about the really meaningful issues. And also sometimes we just don't know what's going to be meaningful for one person. And we don't know what everyone's life story is. So if I said, like, write about a time you had a fight with a parent, well, that's presuming a lot. Depending on where you work, you may not have been raised by a parent. You may not have been allowed to fight with an adult figure. Maybe you also just don't want to write about that right now. Maybe there's no real juice for you in that, or you just talked about it in therapy. So right now, those feelings aren't really needing expression. You don't know where a person's coming from. So that's another reason why I really like to leave my prompts open-ended and focused on the craft rather than the subject matter. Okay. And the other thing, and this is the other thing that I always try to aim for in a creative writing class, seek a shift. Aim to create an image of restitution that reframes the painful experience. Now, Luis de Salvo is talking specifically about reframing an issue so that you have an image of restitution. Again, though, depending on what you're writing about, you may not need or be able to direct how people shift, right? I love the book Structure and Surprise because it gives us different options and examples of the way we can shift in a poem and have an epiphany, but it doesn't say what that epiphany has to be. And maybe here's a really good point to kind of go away from Luis de Salvo and talk a little bit about some other things that I've learned in the psychology of creativity. I think one of the issues that I worried about when I was a newer teacher is how do I, one of the things I thought I needed to do was to get students to get cheerful about a subject. If they were writing about a problem, I felt like they needed to end the poem with something like, but that was in the past and I'm all better now. Or this is a problem, but I'm so resilient, I can handle it. I felt like they needed to walk away feeling empowered. And one of the things that I've learned, and I think some of the research bears this out, is that the really therapeutic thing is for people to feel heard and feel like they can authentically express themselves where they're at right now, and know that someone else has listened to them, and not necessarily that someone has tried to change them, but just that someone has listened. And so if you are finding people writing poems where they declare uh, an uncomfortable feeling or talk about grief or anything like that, that's not necessarily a sign you're doing anything wrong. If they feel comfortable making an honest declaration of their feelings, then in many ways that on its own can be very healing, holing. Obviously, there are situations where you might need, depending on who you are and where you're teaching, you might need to contact an administrator or someone if you say, if you think that you're really worried about a student. And of course, I encourage you to do that if you see that arise. But if students, adults, children, whatever age group are talking about uncomfortable feelings, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Um, what I would suggest is that you honor those feelings. And there's a great poem by Rumi where he calls it the Rumi poem is called The Guest House, and it's just about I really wish I had this poem written on my bones, as one of my poetry mentors and colleagues, Kim Rosen, talks about in her book Saved by a Poem. But she speaks this poem, The Guest House by Rumi, all the time. And it's about how we need to honor each feeling. Each feeling has a task for us, and treat it like it's a visitor in your guest house, and treat it honorably. Right. So not fighting the feelings, not saying some of you feelings are welcome and some of you are bad feelings, just like allow all the feelings to come in and treat them honorably and know that they have a task for you, and then let them go. And actually, like, Rumi didn't have a degree in psychology, but that's actually a lot of what we talk about in the psychology of creativity is, you know, uh, and in the psychology of writing and creativity is you are writing and sort of gaining a little distance from your feelings when you write them down, when you can write down a feeling and say it started here and then it went away. I had this powerful emotion, but it was temporary, and I'm not being controlled by it because I am a guest house, and this was a feeling that entered and then left, and I remained the same, or I'm still intact, even though that feeling was big and powerful and once filled my guest house. So, Rumi's doing amazing therapy in that poem, The Guest House, which you can find anywhere if you Google it. I really do. I think I need to learn how to write that poem on my bones because I reference it a lot. Okay, so going back to Luis de Salvo, be authentic, write from a deep, genuine place, letting stories come from within. Again, don't try to fake it, just be authentic. Two, embrace slow writing, allow time for reflection and deep immersion in the process. There are writers I know who will say that they only have like 15 minutes in the morning to write, and sometimes they've done their best writing like in a doctor's office waiting for someone else to call their name. So sometimes you got to do what you got to do. But yeah, ideally, you do want to write slowly and allow plenty of time for reflection. I have also heard from the poet Heather Bourbeau. I interviewed her on the Poetry Salon cast, and she's someone who has some more experience with this. And she has a wonderful book out called Monarch, which documents some really difficult things in the history of this country and in the settling of the Western states. And I asked her how did she deal with the self-care aspect of writing that book, and she said um after her writing day she would go shake it off, and she says that animals in the wild do this. If they experience a traumatic situation, you see them shake it off. And so one of the things that we can do is go for a walk, do some kind of movement that allows you to shake off whatever feelings you might have had. And also, talking to a friend, taking a nap. These are also really good things you can do for self-care as well. I have another friend who writes, and then after writing, she goes and she walks for 30 minutes. And part of that is really useful because, again, you can shake off intense feelings. But another great thing too is that it does allow your mind to kind of work out any creative problems you have. So again, going back to what I said before, to me, some of the things that I've learned in the psychology of creativity that help us have a good emotional experience of our writing and our creative selves are also the things that help us artistically to grow and have a great artistic experience or create a great artistic product as well. So again, I think some of these tools are great for both, self-knowledge and self-care and artistic expression. Okay. So those are all the do's and some of the don'ts. Don't replace professional help. Writing is a tool, not a substitute for therapy or medical care. Don't get stuck on perfection. Don't censor, cross out, or erase. Keep the pen moving or rewrite prompts if stuck. This is also part of why I like having a timer for 15 minutes. If you have so much free time that you can pause and get critical, sometimes that's really a detriment. And I've been in a situation where sometimes I have all day to write a page, and I sit down and I just get hypercritical. And I know I'm not supposed to, but it happens. But if I'm in a workshop and the person facilitating the workshop says you only have 15 minutes or half an hour to write, and then you have to go somewhere else. You have another activity you have to go to. Well, I will definitely use that time for writing and not for self-censoring because I don't have time to self-censor. So sometimes setting those timers can be really useful. Okay, don't get stuck on perfection. I also like to tell people whoever writes the worst draft wins, because I think sometimes you're so busy focusing on trying to write something good that it can really mess with your writing because your attention is on the wrong thing. So I try to tell people like, look, this is our writing workshop. You can go to a bookstore and read perfect poems. Not that anything like that exists, but you can go and you can read really polished, finished, completed work at the bookstore. Here in the writing workshop, we get to see each other's messy, rough drafts. Um, or you can write and not even share this rough draft. So there is no reason to get hung up on perfectionism here. Try to write something bad, try to write something incomplete, try to write something that's not perfect, because that is part of what we need to do in the rough draft process, right? Um, I've only had this work out badly once or twice, and it's because I was working with some kids who were very smart. And when I said whoever writes the worst draft wins a prize, they were like, they really wanted to win that prize. And they did write some bad stuff, some stuff that's like objectively cliche and whatever. So you do have to make sure you are telling people the reason why you give that caveat, that you can write badly. It's not because you really want them to. It's that you need to like allow them permission to do it if it happens, right? So that doesn't happen often, but it did happen once. So I do want to give that caveat. Okay. Uh don't use this as a cry for help, avoiding using writing solely as a call for help instead of seeking needed support. Again, go see mental health care professionals when the situation calls for that. Okay. And don't overwhelm yourself. If you feel overwhelmed, stop and focus on self-care. This is one thing that I don't think is in writing as a way of healing. So it might be though. I mean, I've read a lot of things and sometimes I forget where I get which information. But I do know there was some research that suggested, writing alone and ruminating on yourself all day long, that can have negative effects on your mental health. Okay. I know a lot of us sometimes fantasize about a life where we can go off to a mountain and just focus on our own writing for weeks and months. And I'm going to tell you, that's not actually necessarily something to be desired, because sometimes when you're writing and you're alone too often, you just get stuck in your own feelings. It's much better to write in shorter spurts. It's much better to write and go share your writing with friends. If you can have a writing retreat, great. Try to do it with some friends who can meet up with you at the end of the day and remind you you're not alone and listen to your writing and share with you their writing. I think that's like that's the ideal situation for having an emotionally healthy and artistically sound writing experience, which of course is why I teach creative writing workshops, because I don't want to write alone. Okay, so that's all that I want to say about the do's and don'ts. And then, as I said, with these do's and don'ts, I think I'm going to highlight them. The two things that I have found most useful as both someone trying to get a good artistic product out of people and someone trying to make sure that we all have a good emotionally safe and revelatory experience. And these are the two biggest do's that I always go for. And that is one, using concrete, authentic details. Can I highlight that? Well, I'm going to put it in bold and italics, and I'm going to make it very large because that's really important. And the other thing is seeking a shift. And I'm just going to say it again. I'm sorry if I am repeating myself here. In art, right? In art, we want to make the invisible visible. That's why if you read any contemporary poetry or writing, or you watch movies especially, we don't get stuck on people's feelings just inside their head. We always are trying to make what happens inside our head visible in an external sense, right? And without that, you can't have art. You just really can't have art. Everyone pause for a minute, close your eyes. Is there art inside your head? I know everyone's head works a little bit differently, but my guess is that you're probably visualizing something or hearing something inside your own brain. And if you wanted to express that to someone else, you would need to do it through the medium of art sensory perceptions, because those are things that we share. Okay. Those are the things that we share. And that's the artistic reason why it's so important for us to focus on sensory perceptions. And then the emotional reason is because going back to the Rumi's guest house, we are not our feelings. Feelings can be transitory. And if you're in a place where you're experiencing a negative feeling, it's really important to remember that that negative feeling might be temporary. The poet Rilke says, no feeling is final. Um, and and it's one of the reasons why he's one of the great poets, right? Because no feeling is final. And I can't remember the rest of the quote off the top of my head, but it's like no feeling is final, both agony and ecstasy, are only temporary feelings, right? So, when we're talking about our sensory perceptions and how we feel in response to something that happens, it reminds us that we are not, hello, kitty cat. We are not inherently happy people, inherently sad people. We can experience happiness as it arises, usually in response to certain circumstances. We experience sadness as it arises, usually in response to certain circumstances. I know there's lots of spiritual traditions that'll tell you, like, happiness is inside of us, and you can be happy even in terrible circumstances. You could be sad even in terrible circumstances. And I'm not here to poo-poo on anyone's spiritual or religious beliefs, but for the most part, most of us, we have emotional reactions to things that happen in the external world. And art is a way for us to talk about those things. Okay. So that's why we use the concrete details almost always in the writing. And then the other thing is having a shift. Well, as I said in art, the point of a piece of art is to move you from one place to another, emotionally speaking. And that's also what we try to do in a therapeutic sense. We want to move from one state of being to another state of being. I really love to quote actually Saint Francis's prayer. And again, it's not about a religious tradition necessarily, although we could say that art and psychology definitely connects with religious beliefs, and the process of religion maybe is also about transformation partially as well. But there's a quote from Saint Francis of Assisi. It's the prayer of Saint Francis of Assisi, and I may not have it totally written on my bones right now, but it's something like Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is division, unity. Where there is injustice, justice. Where there is, or maybe it's where there's injustice, pardon. Um, you get the idea. And then it goes, for it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is through death that we are born into eternal life. So, that's a prayer that's just about moving from one thing to another, where there's love, hate, where there's hate, love. Yeah. Where there's hate, let me sow love. Where there's division, unity. Where there is something else. I'm going to have to look that up. Anyways, you don't have to memorize things perfectly. You can draw from the internet, but I'm not going to look that up right now. But is the point is that you're trying to create some kinds of shifts. Now, those are two pretty simple principles. And there's about a million different ways that you can use them. And I am making a shameless plug here, but I created this wonderful book. I think it's wonderful. It's called Method and Mystery, a research-based guide to teaching poetry, plus 60 original prompts to take your students deeper. And you can get that from Amazon. If you write to me, I will give you a PDF on pay what you can basis. One, because I want everyone to have it. Two, if you get it as a PDF, it won't cut down any trees, so it'll save the environment. And three, we won't have to give any money to the oligarchs. So you can reach me at Tresha Faye Haefner at gmail.com. Can get a PDF copy of that book. If you really want a hard copy, you can also order it on Amazon. I think those are the only two places, the only two ways to get a copy right now at this moment. But if you take a look at my Substack, also, if you are a paid member of my Substack or you want to donate a few bucks, you can also get some of the most useful prompts that I have. Um, and I'll just say, I think some of the best things that I can share are in that Substack, but there are many different ways that you can use concrete detail and shift emotions. And the last thing that I want to say, and this is the kind of be all end all of prompts, whenever I find somebody is getting a prompt, but they're still stuck on what they want to say, the best thing to do is to ask, why are you stuck? Or if you're not wanting to write about this, why do you not want to write about this? Or even if you're doing the 15-minute free write and you notice someone's not writing, you can ask, why don't you want to write? And write down all the reasons you don't want to or can't write right now. Because usually what will happen is that that can unleash a floodgate. And then usually in that floodgate, someone will have an epiphany and realize why it is they can't write. I've asked that question a couple of times, and sometimes it's like, I have too many other things I need to do right now. I can't focus on my writing. Sometimes it's like, I know I need to write about this one topic and I don't want to address it. It's too sad. It's too upsetting. Um, Sometimes you can get a really good prompt out of just writing about what you don't want to write. Like occasionally I have written about something really sad or upsetting by just saying, I don't want to write this. I don't want to tell you this terrible thing happened. I don't want to tell you that terrible thing happened. And sometimes that becomes the poem or the piece is writing about how you don't want to write about something. Right. I think the only time where this exercise hasn't worked is in a couple situations where I was working with kids and people from differing backgrounds where it was expected that they were dealing with certain issues, emotional or academic, and sometimes they really had a problem with the writing process itself. And they didn't want to tell me this, but it became apparent that they weren't writing because the writing itself was an impediment to their expression. They didn't know how to do it, or they were struggling with the mechanics of it. In which case, if you do find yourself in that situation, you can also, if it's possible, just ask them to dictate things if they feel comfortable. Um, and if not, sometimes then you let them sit and listen in on other people's um experience of the writing, and you direct them to the appropriate resource or the appropriate person after the class. So depending on what circumstances you're writing in or teaching creative writing in, you might find that that happens. And just know you're not alone in encountering that kind of experience. Okay. But as always, I really try not to push, because the reason why someone can't write or isn't writing may be more than you can handle as a writing teacher. So I urge a lot of gentleness, a lot of patience, much more than focusing on the product. Okay. So I didn't set a timer. I don't know how long I've been talking, but I hope that everything that I've shared has been useful. And as I'm saying this, I just realized there's one other big component that I want to share, and I am going to keep it as brief as possible. And I've already kind of touched on this, but that comes to the sharing part of it. I knew I was forgetting something, right? So when it comes to sharing your creative writing, again, I think there are some ways of doing that that are better than others, some that are helpful, some that are less helpful. And let's see where I put this. Do's and don'ts, key techniques. Yeah, the best rules of writing. These are the important ones. Best practices for sharing. So again, I always start out by telling people they don't have to share, and I make good on that. I really won't push anyone. Um, I remind everyone that their writing does not need to look like everyone else's. I can't tell you how many times with new writers or kids or older writers or advanced writers, they hear one person's writing and they say, wow, that person's writing is so good. Mine doesn't look like theirs. I think I did this wrong. Remind people over and over there's no one way to do this. And the point is that you write something that looks a little different from the person next to you. So there's no right or wrong way. And it's okay. And it's also okay if you do futz with the assignment. It's okay if you do write off topic. All of our prompts are a way of getting started, and where you go from that is really your process of discovery. So it shouldn't look like everyone else's. Okay. Um, If you are in a Zoom room, consider encouraging people to put lines they like in the chat. Yeah, this is the thing I really try to emphasize when someone has just written something new. They're not ready for critique on it yet. You're still kind of, raw with the feelings, or you may just not have the distance you need to evaluate something artistically. And especially if you're writing primarily for self-expression, you definitely don't want to censor what you write after you've written it. So I always tell people, like, we're not going to critique each other's writing. However, sometimes people want to feel heard and they want to if they've just written something that's powerful or stirring or emotionally stimulating for them, they might really not want to hear silence afterwards, right? So you do want to create a way to allow people to feel heard without feeling judged. And one really useful tool I have for that is I ask everyone, if we're in person, just write down any line from what a person says that resonates with you or that you like for any reason. You don't have to explain why you like it. You don't have to explain why it stuck out for you. Just write it down. When we're in the Zoom room, I ask people to write down the lines that they like in the chat. And if we're in person, we do it in person. And then sometimes, if there's time, you'll just go around the room and say, like, everyone read the line you wrote down, read what you heard. Don't comment on it. Don't share your stories about it. Don't say whether the writing is good or bad. Just repeat back to the person some of the phrases that you heard them say. Okay. That's a great way of making sure the person feels like they've been heard without necessarily being judged. Okay. And the same for me as the instructor and facilitator. If I'm in a workshop with people who I know want my advice on their writing, I will sometimes offer a little bit of direction or feedback that, says, I think you're going in this direction. This is the right direction to go in. Maybe I nudge them in that direction. But if I'm in a place where it's all new people and I don't know them very well, I try to just let them know that they're being heard without being judged. So I might just say, like, this line really stuck out to me. And then, of course, I also like to say thank you for sharing, because if nothing else, you can say thank you for sharing. Okay. And again, I don't make anyone share, but sometimes I found if I tell people, you don't have to share your whole piece, but you can share just one line. Sometimes that makes them feel comfortable enough that they'll start with one line and then share the whole piece, or they'll just share one line. And you can also tell people that if they don't want to read what they wrote, the whole thing of what they wrote, they can also just talk a little bit about the experience. So sometimes I've had people say, um, this was really hard to write, or it took me a while to get into this, but then I had this epiphany. Maybe they don't want to share what it is, but sometimes just being able to say, like, this is what the experience was like for me, is a way of connecting with the audience or processing a feeling. So that's another option as well. And this one's really fun, especially if you're in a group with maybe folks who are a little bit reluctant to share. I love to have everybody read their poem out loud all at once. And what this does is it allows them to speak their piece of writing out into the room, but because everyone's speaking all at once, no one's going to hear them. And so sometimes this can be a really good way of getting people past feeling too shy or self-conscious. And then I tell everyone, like, keep speaking your piece. So that way you don't have someone, finishing early and then they hear everyone else's writing. So it's just like, keep reading your piece out loud over and over and over until I say stop. And sometimes when people do this, they realize, oh, saying this out loud isn't so scary, right? But again, I don't push it. If there's someone who's like, I don't even want to say this out loud while everyone else is talking, that, like, I won't force that. Okay. Yeah. My jaw hurts. I love sharing this information. I really hope this has been helpful. And again, I'm just going to give credit where credit is due. Very little of this is anything that I came up with on my own. A lot of this is just me synthesizing some useful information I've gained from the Psychology of Creativity program, from books like Writing as a Way of Healing, from years of taking workshops with other really wonderful creative writing mentors, and some of it from my own experience. And I want to say in closing, uh, teaching creative writing is probably one of the top joys of my life. Maybe we don't have to have hierarchies. It's one of the great joys of my life. And sometimes it is very difficult, and sometimes it does stir up a lot of feelings for me, for those who are writing. Sometimes after a creative writing session, I need to go for a walk, talk to a friend, write about my own feelings, make a note to talk about it more with my therapist, right? So these tools are things that I use as a person, as a writer myself, and as a writing mentor. And I will say, if anyone is thinking about creating a creative writing group, a class, bringing creative writing into a school where maybe you already teach, I just want to say that the rewards for doing this work are just monumental. If you like creative writing, you get to hear some amazing creative writing from other people. If you care about seeing people grow and discover the best in themselves, you can see some of this work happening as well. If you care about making sure people feel seen and heard and know that they have a community that supports them. A creative writing community is not just about creative writing, it's about the community. And one of the big joys that I've had in my life is developing a community and seeing people make friends with each other through these creative writing programs. And I think that's something that we really need right now. And it's almost entirely free, aside from the time and energy that you put into it. Paper, pencils. If you're writing on your laptop and you already have a laptop, it's probably one of the most affordable, eco-friendly things that you can do with your free time. So there's just all kinds of good reasons to do this work for yourself and with and for your community, whatever your community may be for you. And if anyone wants to know more about this, again, you can reach out to me at treshafayhefner@gmail.com. You can find me on Substack. It's the Poetry Salon stack.substack.com. And I look forward to hearing more from you and seeing you all in the next video. Have fun writing, everyone.